Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Talent Revolution, Tales from the Trenches. I'm your co-host, Joe Shambaum.
And I'm Jill Caniglio-Kirk.
Jill, I am excited today. I've got two really cool things that I want to share.
Really? What are they?
So first is our special guest. Florian Mayer is with us. Florian is a 10-plus year veteran in engineering and product development. He is a global individual that has worked in multiple different countries, and we get to talk about global hiring. So welcome to the show, Florian.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Florian.
I'm really excited to be here.
Do you want to give us a few minutes of your background or how you want to introduce yourself, Florian?
Yeah, sure. So, I was born and raised in Germany. And already when I was in high school, I had planned to work and live abroad. And I started in the field of control engineering, embedded software. Early on, I got into responsibility for our simulation-based testing program. And that was when I noticed that I'm not only curious and excited about technology, but also about, bridging disciplines, working with people, understanding people and other cultures. And when my division in 2020 decided to globalize its footprint, I volunteered. And fortunately, COVID was a thing then. So that got a bit delayed, but I got the opportunity actually to build up a competence center in Bulgaria. So that gave me my first intercultural exposure. And that helped me a lot when I then finally got deployed to India in 2023 to have the right tools and mindset to build up an R&D service hub from ground there. And now, a few months ago, I relocated to the US, continuing my global journey here and more importantly, reunited with my wife.
Well, that's
Wonderful.
awesome. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm sure the best part of it all is to reunite with your wife. So, and if anyone is listening, he is all open to opportunities here in Metro Detroit. So give him a call, connect with him on LinkedIn as well. So welcome to the show. And we're talking about global hiring, and Jill and Florian, I know you've listened to a few episodes. I have this little analogy aspect and Joe-isms, and I have one for this. So I wanted to get your take on these things, guys. So I was thinking about it, and I'm relating global hiring to pizzas. So think about it, right? There's all different types of pizzas. There's flatbreads, there's thick crust, there's Chicago, there's Detroit, there's gourmet. There's all different styles.
Brooklyn
and there's
pizza, right?
Yeah.
Which kind?
Brooklyn pizza.
Brooklyn pizza, New York style. There's, and as you travel globally, there's all different flatbreads and different other things that kind of mock a pizza. And then you start thinking about it, well, there's tomato sauce, which is more the traditional, but then barbecue, or it could be fettuccine, or all these Alfredo aspects. And then all the toppings are the different types of rolls. And sometimes the toppings overlap. Sometimes it's a whack-out, weird topping that you add into it, or you add a little spice with some other toppings, which change the different types of rolls. So I might be way off here, guys, but what do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy. I think because it's such a global food, you have it everywhere. But of course, Germany is very close to Italian pizza. We have many Italian immigrants also. And then the Indian pizza was always very spicy.
Right.
And so it's kind of, you find it everywhere, but it has its nuances and different shapes, and you have to adapt to that.
See?
And I think that's
global hiring,
and
right?
also be curious. Of course, if you say, I want my pizza, the one I get in Rome, you won't get happy no matter where else you,
Well, and trust me, like when you order a pizza in Rome and you don't know that you have to tell them to cut it if you take it out, trust me, that was an unpleasant surprise for me on a carryout in Rome. So, right, they do not cut their pizzas.
And I think the analogy is great because it combines this curiosity, adapting, understanding also how it works somewhere else.
Right.
And they all taste good, right?
They all taste good. The other thing is they all have this kind of commonality about something that generally flat, right? Has some sort of cheese, has some sort of crust, right? So there's those common elements, which I think highlights exactly this global landscape we're talking about.
Sorry, I needed that Joeism and analogy, so I'm glad it worked out for everybody. So appreciate it. Well, Jill, let's get into it. Where do we want to start?
Well, number one, I want to just say how exciting it is for me to have our first kind of HR talent acquisition guest, because, I've probably had a lot of desire in my career of working with so many engineering leaders to put them on the hot seat. And so this is actually a personally exciting opportunity for me to have that chance. So thank you so much for joining us, Florian. I too have worked globally. I haven't had those opportunities like you've had, or taken advantage of those opportunities to live in other places, which I think is an important distinction, because while I've held global roles, really living and being embedded in those cultures brings a whole new element to really understanding them on a deeper level that I'm sure you're going to be able to share with our guests today. So I think it's an amazing opportunity. And I guess I would like to start, if it's okay with you, in really looking at if we talk about the hiring landscape in engineering globally, what is the major differences that you see between the regions that you've had experience with? And then how does, the competition for top talent compare across those regions? Could you maybe start there and give us a little bit of a high level view?
Yeah, sure. So maybe we approach from the very top level. I think two distinct themes are industrialized countries and developing countries. That's what I saw, that you have similarities. I don't want to say that hiring in Germany and US is similar, but if you compare it to countries like India, you have strong laws, strong processes, you have a mature corporate ecosystem. That slows hiring a bit compared to developing countries, but it's also more predictable and reliable. And also what the engineers or the employees value is, of course, salary is always a topic, but it goes more in direction of work culture, work-life balance, long-term stability, because people in many cases, especially engineers, have already a pretty high standard of living. And if you compare that to a developing country, then the ecosystem is much more dynamic. The talent pool expands normally rapidly, and opportunities are abundant on both sides, so for the companies and for the job seekers. And that gives opportunities for rapid scaling, but also you're faced with high turnover, because employees are, from my experience, more opportunistic. They prioritize rapid career progression, short-term opportunities, because that improves their standard of living very quickly, and that is a main driver of many people in such economies.
So what about speed? I mean, I've heard some, I don't say rumors or concepts that certain countries could be faster at hiring than others, besides the onboarding process, right? And I know that the notice period is very different in every country, because I've worked globally in different aspects as well. But the speed of actual hiring, what have you seen from your experience?
So, US is probably or definitely faster than Germany. But if you compare it to India, the interesting thing is that notice period in India is also 3 months for the at least for the multinationals. But an accepted offer is non-binding for the applicant. That's why all the companies target people who are already in their notice period, and then you hire people like a week or 2 weeks before they complete their notice period, and that makes it very fast. But that's very India specific.
Wow, interesting. So I'm guessing you become more attractive as a candidate in India when you're in that mode, because
Exactly.
never realized that.
Yeah, it's a very competitive, and I know we talked before, Florian, about. I know you put in some initiatives there, and I've seen that too with some other friends and TA on that onboarding piece. Right, you've gone through that recruiting cycle with that candidate, and now you're that 2 to 3 months of. I hope they start. And how do you put those strategies in there? It's really difficult. I mean, we talk about it in the U.S. You got 2 weeks or maybe a month max, depending on the levels. And how do we ensure that person? But think of it now, 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
It's a huge obstacle, I would say.
So we always had multiple similar roles, so in case one doesn't join, so we still have someone else to join, and we also kept kind of a short list of future candidates in case that we have such we call it dropouts.
Right.
And the agencies also do mock-up calls, so they pretend to be another company and try to find out if the candidate is open to
Wow.
yeah, so you do a lot of kind of strategic
like contingency plans, it sounds like, right? You really have to have contingency plans in place.
Exactly. And but on the other side, my fastest hire was 4 days from first interview to joining. And one of them was a public holiday.
Wow.
That's something I'm not sure if it's distinct for India or maybe for developing countries in general, that you can make things really move quickly. And people also work in the weekends on a public holiday if they see purpose or benefit, if it's really a good candidate and if it's very likely that we'll get him.
So if we take that example of 4 days to hiring a candidate, could you kind of highlight some of your takeaways between what made that work so quickly and what was kind of a key or strategic element of that when you were recruiting in India?
So, yeah, for us, it was multiple components. I would say what is very important is a structured assessment process and something which is highly automated. So we use tools so to not depend on people doing that.
Can you give us an example of the assessment? Was it a software kind of test?
Yeah, exactly. So the data privacy rules in India are not that strict. So you can do much more than in Germany. And that was highly automated. And it also monitored the whole PC so that there's no cheating. And then I think a lightweight process is important. So we had kind of a applicant tracking system so that all the people are on the same page, because we always had subject matter experts from Germany involved in the assessment part. So to make it also independent from individuals, that everybody could access the information without email ping pong or whatever. And then having a clear idea, what do you want? So what is the job and how would the ideal candidate look like, so that you get a very quick alignment. Is it this guy or is it not that guy?
Right. Can I just ask a question about when you get the picture of what's the ideal candidate? Are there components of that that are both technical as well as more on the soft skill side or on the kind of behavioral side? Or are you thinking more in the terms of the nuts and bolts of their technical expertise?
In engineering, of course, technical parts are very important. And that role was kind of a software development expert. So, of course, in such a role, the technical part is key. From a soft skill part, it's more the feeling. What I felt very difficult due to also the cultural aspects, to apply same expectations as in Germany. And in Germany, one of the standard questions, why do you want to join that company? If you ask that someone who applies every day for 3 positions, he'll say, okay, I don't know that company. I'm applying for the job, not for the company. So that doesn't really help you further. It's more about the work ethics I would focus on. Because, yes, as we talked about, people are very opportunistic. So if they get a better job, they will change. They are not married with the company. And that was really the extreme opposite of Germany, where people are married with the company for 20, 30 years.
It sounds like people are looking for what's the best fit for their skills.
Exactly.
How can they best grow their competencies or, because they're thinking more about their progression, not necessarily within your company, but anywhere, right? So it's more about them and does it fit them and where they could excel and be successful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and what we also did is include the other people who were already on board to have a short chat with the candidates, because they have to collaborate and they are from the same culture, so they can much better evaluate if it's a culture or a work culture fit or not.
Right.
Of course, as an outsider, even though I live there, it's still, after 2 years, it was still difficult to get the nuances of the personal behavior.
Well, to me, that's a really interesting observation on your part. I'm wondering if you started there with recognizing that, or if it took you some time to understand that maybe there's a gap for me that I need to have filled by other people. Can you share a little bit about that and that maybe aha moment for you, or how you kind of derived at that decision?
I would say that's part of my personality. I think, or in general, if we look at it, if you move to a different country and you go there with a mindset, I'm the best and I know everything, that's a fast track ticket to
fast failure.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you need to be open-minded, learn quickly, and also leverage the knowledge which is already there. So I think it's better to assume you know nothing than to assume you know everything. And if you don't have that basic mindset, I think you might not be the right candidate for such an adventure.
Or you might be very, very, you might take several months to get on the right page where you're going to gain momentum, right?
So, exactly, yeah.
That assimilation plan, right, Joe?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I want to dive into one piece, or see if there's this piece into this. Did you notice, and maybe even in both countries or all the countries that you worked into those, was there a generational difference within those? Meaning, like the millennials and the Gen X and the Gen Ys and that side of it. You talked about, lifelong companies and direction, and maybe even in others where they're trying to continuously progress. Did you see any of that inside of, and there's a stigmatism here of millennials, and I'm not sure what the newer version is now after the millennials want a quick fist move, but did you see that in the other countries?
So I would say in Europe in general, it's pretty similar to the US. Okay. That's my feeling. In India, there's an extreme gender gap. So the young generation is more like our young generation. The let's say what comes before millennials, like the boomer generation. That card is very traditional, very.
Okay, so they still stay in the generation stigmatisms of that.
Yeah, but it's the difference is much bigger, and there's a much stronger, generation clash than what I ever noticed in Europe or the US.
Okay, so that gap is just much wider, and there's more. There's just more stuff that sets them apart, or it's more drastic. Okay.
So what about the time zone and the cultural differences? Because, you mentioned, the India team is still working with Germany and others. Like, how did you bridge those with you obviously did and amalgamated into a new country, but what about your global teams that you're supporting? How are you able to integrate those cultures together?
Yeah. Let's take these two things apart a bit, culture and time zone. So culture, I think it's a thing you can't undervalue. You have to be aware of that. And what we fostered is really this intercultural exchange. So we established intercultural trainings for the whole team. And we did that also more on a workshop basis than a presentation, because we said that's people working together, and yes, they come from different cultures, but it's also different people. And if we say this culture is like this and this culture is like that, we might be wrong for that particular people. And we wanted to, it was only 20%, 30% theory, and the rest was discussion, because we wanted to foster that curiosity in people and make them discuss and make them define rules for their way of collaborating. So to raise awareness, to make them aware, not to give them a set of rules, but to equip them with the right mindset and tools to be able to work together in the long term. And I think that's also, if you lift it a bit up on a company level, you won't be able to train the people for it. You have to make them aware, curious, develop trust also.
The way I see what you're describing is you recognize the need for this group of people to have a common goal and work through something together that wasn't a work-related project, but more around the role. How are we going to communicate and how are we going to act? And through that dialogue, through that kind of personal journey, in essence, you were building some camaraderie, some teamwork, some understanding, right? Some relationships, some vulnerabilities came out, I'm sure, right? But it's great to hear, of course, as an HR leader, that you recognize that's the first place to start, because I think sometimes that's minimized, and sometimes companies focus so much on the work deliverable and the project that they skip that very important step of getting the team started in the right way. And as you know, Florian, I'm sure there were people that sat there with their arms crossed that didn't contribute. There were people that stole the show and did all the talking. And if you think about the cultural dynamics of that, I just sat through a global meeting myself, an HR meeting, and I can see that I almost wanted to say, Americans, be quiet, let the other people talk, right? Just because there's a natural sense of, what is normal and what is not in certain cultures, right? But it's great to hear that was recognized, and I'm sure that was a huge component of setting the project up for success.
Exactly, and of course you can't undervalue having a strategy. So if maybe we can talk about that later, because it's a bigger topic, how to set something up. But what we leveraged a lot is a scaled agile framework as a mode of operation, but I think you can't replace trust and this feeling of belonging together by a process. The process can support the daily work, but if you don't have trust in the teams will anyway kind of,
go their own way.
And work on their own agenda. And so I think culture has to come first, and process is then something which makes the culture succeed.
Now, was there an HR team to help you on that?
Not so much, actually. So it came up. I was kind of a pioneer there. So we had already a subsidiary there. It was highly focused on sales, manufacturing, and mechanical engineering. And the company wanted to build a more software-focused hub. So I was the guy setting or developing the groundwork, the foundation, and also to advise then on the strategy, how to scale that up. So the plan now is to have a 400 people software hub there, and that's a different story. I think it was a very good approach to say we start a bit smaller, develop and understand, and then as soon as we have understood, we can scale quickly and know how to do it.
Yeah, and then if we look at your roots in Germany as an engineering leader, how would you say, what did you take from that as far as strengths that you use to tackle this new challenge? You know, if you think a little bit about leadership and your experiences in Germany, can you maybe shed a little light on that?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think that's a stereotype, but it's true to some extent. Is structure and organizing. And yeah, even in our case, we had like 100 stakeholders involved. If you count the senior leadership in Germany, the team leaders, the subject matter expert, and to bring them all efficiently on one page, that's nothing what you can do through, I say, sending 100 emails a day. And I think that's something where we Germans might be culturally kind of pretty good in, especially the engineers. And the challenge is then always to not overdo it. And that's something what I learned in India quickly, to kind of do this quick wins, not to do the big solution, to have a lightweight axle, share that with all the people relevant, have something like a tracker, and make a quick win which works and is easy and everybody understands it.
Yeah.
And from leadership,
I think that quick win, is that also part of the culture as to needing that kind of excitement, needing that reaffirmation of positivity, right? And that feedback loop. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's also pretty important if you globalize from an industrialized country, especially. I'm not sure, maybe it's easier to do something like that from US because you don't have the language barrier. But in Germany, yeah, we had a lot of discussions on why do we need to speak English now. And if you don't make quick wins in such a situation, if you lose yourself in process and whatever, you lose the momentum and you lose the people who are anyway already doubtful. I'm not sure if that's an English word.
Yes, it is. The doubters.
And yeah, they need, you promise them something, and if they don't see that coming quickly, they might shear away again.
Right. So they need that spark. They need that reaffirmation, right? We're getting somewhere. We're making progress, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And from a leadership perspective, what was pretty interesting is that I always had the feeling we Germans are very distant. We don't really care about others. That are the stereotypes we are confronted with. I don't want to now focus too much. But the interesting thing was that, we care on a different level. And because we have this long-term relationship to employees, we approach them in a different way. And that helped me a lot because I was not focused on make them successful in the next, 3 months, of course, also, but to make them stay with the company and to make them excited about the company, about the long-term journey.
Right.
And that
so you had a new challenge like you had not faced before, right? So you found strategies to kind of help keep that connection and that.
And that sparked actually, and that worked because kind of this long-term transition of the company from, let's say, a mechanic company to a software company, that was very exciting for the people. And I always try to highlight that as an advantage for candidates, also to say, look, there's so much development, and when there's growth, there's always opportunities. And that helped a lot, actually, in such an environment where everybody looks for new opportunities or growth.
Look at the advantages of having a global team. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what your findings were and what you found to be some of the advantages of having that. It sounds like lots of hard work to kind of get it going and bring people together and get everybody on the same page. But what were your takeaways there?
Yeah, I think the most common assumption is that a global team saves you money, and globalization in, let's say, the Western world. I don't want to be that. I don't know the term, but I have the feeling that many people connect cost saving with globalization. But I see there are many more advantages in globalizing. So getting access to talent which is just not available in your country or your place.
Right.
Also getting access to different perspectives. So other countries, no matter which one, they have different ways of approaching challenges. And that if you're able to combine that, that's a very innovative, you can create a very innovative ecosystem. And third one I would see is, getting access to local knowledge about the local market. So if you want to sell your products, no matter if it's a service, a software, or a hard product in a certain market, you might engineer it
with a bias.
Yeah, exactly. Not targeted for that market. And the local engineers, they normally know exactly what is relevant to that market.
Right. I think, that you eliminate the groupthink because we all think differently, right? We all bring new ideas forward. We've culturally been programmed a bit differently. Like you commented earlier, maybe Germans are wired a certain way to gravitate toward process and other things, right? So you kind of take out some of those elements of saying, we don't have groupthink, right? You said the market perspective, I think, is a huge one. And I think that one does tie back to cost, because if you understand all of your customers, all of your markets, and all of these things, and you can solve all of them with one, be it product, service, software, whatever you're doing, then that has to lead to cost-effective synergies, right, and other things like that. So
exactly, and the same is about time zones. I think if you only see them as a challenge, then they are probably as a challenge. But you can also see them as an advantage because you can do kind of 24/7 engineering, and if you assign responsibilities appropriately, you can take advantage from it. I don't want to say it's not a challenge. It definitely is, but you can also take advantage from that.
Right. I actually have lived this one myself, Florian. I know one of the parts of our podcast is really sharing some tales from the trenches. And this one in particular came obvious to me working on a global project within a job I had. My boss was based in Europe, and we were working jointly on a project developing some communication materials and working on some Q&A kind of documents. But we realized that if we lived in the same country, we would never get as far, because I would send him something, I'd wake up, he'd add to it. It was like this constant cycle of something building, and we just had that aha moment about how powerful that can be if you want to keep things moving fast, right? There's no idle time. So if we can really be on the same page and have a common goal, and we can both contribute to it, I lived that and saw that work really well. So I think it's an important illustration that it can be problematic, but it also can be leveraged as a competitive advantage. So
exactly, especially also if you globalize your processes and the process, governance or execution. If you distribute that smartly, then you get much faster reaction times. We had to actually change our KPIs because the reaction time got so fast because
blowing away the targets. We can't have that, right?
The KPIs didn't make sense anymore because they were too awesome. Good. So, but I think that highlights if you do it right, you can also see it as an advantage.
And that's probably true of so many other things too, right? Just a very interesting thing to think about, how a weakness can be potentially, or a pain point can be used as an advantage. But anyway, Joe, go ahead. You wanted to say something.
I was just, a lot of the listeners are HR and talent acquisition folks and others, and we appreciate that. But I was thinking of, what advice would you give to an HR leader or even talent acquisition person with this global perspective and hiring and setting up teams? Any advice you'd give to an HR or a talent acquisition person?
Yeah, I would come back to this assumption part. So don't assume that the process and the mindset which helped you to be successful in your home country can be copy pasted to this other country. And that maybe leads a bit to strategy. I think what's really important before you get started is to develop a strategy and also objectives. What do you want to achieve? I think it's also totally legitimate to say, for that aspect, we want to have cost savings. And then you have to adjust your strategy to that. And that helps you, while executing, to stay focused on what you want to achieve. So we, in my team, we had certain parts which were cost focused, other parts which were really talent focused. So of course, in this cost sensitive area, we talked a lot about engineers' salaries and do we want to really pay that much, whatever. But in this talent part, we said, okay, if we get him, it doesn't matter if it's $2,000-$3,000 more or less, because we want that knowledge. And I think if you don't do that work before and align the people on that, right. And I think the part of HR is to maybe guide also the leadership through that, because I have the feeling that, especially engineering leadership is often maybe a bit biased for execution. Sometimes it's helpful to think first about what you really want to achieve, to not get lost in the weeds while executing.
Yeah, I think, the conversation between HR and engineering leadership is critical. And this strategic alignment you talked about, saying, your job as an engineering leader is to help them understand what capability do we really need. And like you said, we want to strategically overpay in this market because that's a gap for us, right? And without that conversation, you could potentially have the HR team pointed in the wrong direction or really not looking for the right thing. So I think that's really important, and maybe oftentimes it's found out through not proactively, through kind of missing the mark a few times, right? Or HR pushing back saying these are the wrong, they're overpaid or whatever it is, right? So I think that proactive approach is really a great recipe for success.
Yeah, and it's not only about salary, it's also about the skill set. So what we did in the beginning, we did this briefing calls for the recruitment agencies with all people who have knowledge about that in the same call. So that the backend team who does the sourcing has the possibility to ask clarifying questions to the absolute experts in that topic, because often a job description isn't that clear. And it's very difficult also to write it in a way that, especially in an intercultural setting, everybody understands the same thing.
Music to my ears.
Yeah, I was going to say that hits home for me in like a grand slam for me, because I myself had an experience working on an India project where a lot of time was invested after the fact, reliving that, doing those phone calls, because the piece of paper wasn't clear only after we had invested in interviewing the candidates that were not the right fit, right? So I think that is like a golden nugget everybody should walk away from today, saying do all that up front, over plan, have all the right decision makers and subject matter experts involved up front, because you're going to get so much more out of the process than if you kind of flip it the other way. But I would just say, comparing it to a traditional U.S. project and looking at the one I did in India, that's the best advice I would give someone as well. So that one certainly resonates with me.
Everybody heard it here, right? Include talent acquisition in the upfront side of things.
We agree with something on with engineering, Joe. How about that? That seems like
it's music to my ears and everyone listening, I'm sure. So, Floyd, any tales that you want to share? Any other quick story about this topic that you want to share to the listeners?
Yeah, maybe back to the, let's say, dropout, because I had a very funny candidate or situation, someone not showing up. So yeah, as I said, it's common, and I had several candidates not showing up on their first day, but one was really memorable. So she called us actually in the morning of her first day and said that she's stuck in traffic and would be 30 minutes late. And that was the last we heard from her. And we were kind of joking that this must be a new Guinness World Record in the longest traffic jam. And everybody was puzzled, even the Indians, why she called, because normally they ghost you. But calling and then saying you're getting delayed was really strange. But yeah, it's funny in hindsight. But it really points out how dynamic the market is, and that you have to mitigate the risk of people not showing up, and you'll only find out in the first day. So as long as they are not at their desk, you have to assume or expect. Assume is maybe the wrong word, but expect such situations.
Yeah, that's interesting, as they chose to call, but I was thinking like maybe the choice of reasons was a little bit questionable, but somehow in their consciousness they felt better about saying something, right?
Yeah.
Than saying nothing. But
I've never got the call that day. I got the call the night before, or the email the night before that, hey, I'm backing out and whatever else. But the day of, that's a good one. So
yeah. That's
I do have a story about that one, but it was in the U.S. and I was supporting a plant, and we had a third shift employee starting. I was visiting the location that the employee was going to, but he was supposed to arrive at 11 p.m. So, of course, I wasn't going to be in the plant at 11 p.m., but somebody was slated to meet with that person and do some, onboarding and other activities, somebody that, was working that shift. But I got jolted out of my sleep at like 5 to 11 that evening, and it was a person saying, oh my gosh, the person that was supposed to be starting, like, you're not going to believe what happened. I just hit a deer and I wrecked my truck. Right, and went into telling me this story. But of course, I looked at it and said, yeah, we can't avoid what happens on our way to work, and believe the whole situation. Ultimately, 3 days later, the person still never showed up for work or ever showed up, right? So I don't think they really hit a deer. I think they were buying time, right? And anyway, that one I was like, gee, that one woke me up in the middle of my sleep, and I think I better start looking for a new maintenance technician, right? But I guess, anyway, we've all had a story or two that we remember in this interesting world we work in, so...
Absolutely. Florian, any summary, any last thoughts that you have on this whole topic that you'd like to share with everyone?
Do you see any specific, because you know your audience better than I do, where you say maybe that's a part we should cover?
I would just say, Florian, any closing words to any leader that might be stepping into their first global project where they're working with people in taking a leadership role where they're leading a global team? What would your, maybe just 30-second, 45 seconds of advice be, words of wisdom for them?
So, I would say it's an exciting journey. You learn so much personally and professionally, but you have to have the right mindset. Be open-minded, be aware, be curious. Also into people, what I felt is if you ask people and say, tell me about your culture, why is it that way? That creates trust and connection. And people are pretty open in sharing that. And then you move also situations, if you have the feeling, there's a misunderstanding, and you move that away from, I am misunderstanding something, to how is it in that culture. It's not about criticizing someone or you misunderstood something. It's about, we're talking about general topics, and that makes it much easier also for some cultures which are more indirect to talk about such things.
Right. That makes sense to me. I mean, people in general will open up if you talk about food or vacations or how do you like to spend time with your family or what sports do you have, right? You kind of start with this common ground and then you kind of start building toward like, let's kind of take this more into a professional setting. But I think those are very wise, very wise words. And I think another consideration is just that there's always apprehension with a new relationship, working with somebody from a new culture. So that guardedness, I think, is easier to break through, right? If you invest in asking questions and taking time and showing genuine interest. So, well, I am so excited to have you here today, Florian. This has been a delightful conversation, reliving some of my global engineering days of working with people like you. I'm not in a global role today, but certainly work in a global organization. So a lot of takeaways for me personally and a lot of things that I could connect to. Joe, any closing remarks or thoughts from you?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great summary, guys. And, we've mentioned it before. You build trust really quickly, right? Get some quick wins, ask the questions, learn about their culture, be inquisitive. And, you're trying to build that relationship, right? And that's with everybody, right? Whether it's your peers, your coworkers, your leaders, everyone in the company that you're working there. And the work that I've done globally, it's been fun that way, right? And learning that and talking to so many different candidates globally on those aspects. And then you learn the nuances, right? And you go in there and make strategies and adapt to it. And like we said, we go back to the pizza. The foundation is basically the same, but we'll thin crust, thick crust, deep dish, different toppings, different pieces, and it really comes together and we all enjoy it, with a glass of wine probably, or whatever your drink of choice, or beer. No, thank you for joining us, Florian. It was awesome conversation. Jill, as always, it's been amazing, and want to thank everyone for listening. Follow, like, share on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, and we appreciate it. And until next time, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. Bye-bye.